Hello, good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are, everyone. And welcome to this first training session organized within the framework of Terra Madre, dedicated to impact. And we'll find out how to make sure that our work is ever more impactful. Before we go into the content of today's training session, first few housekeeping rules. There is interpretation available. If you go in the bottom right corner of the Zoom window, you will find the form of a globe, and there you can choose the channel you want to listen in. You will see we have English available, French, Russian, Portuguese, Spanish, and Italian is available under the option Korean. Another important thing you will see, there is also the opportunity of chatting. There is a chat function in the bottom bar of your Zoom window. We encourage you to use that chat also to ask questions. We will be monitoring the chat and responding to you, and like either in the chat or throughout the course of the presentation. And I'm very happy that the two colleagues who have organized this training session now also appeared in the video. And today with us there is Ian Baker. He's a consultant who's been working with slow food for quite a few years now, really helping us set up the whole work on monitoring and evaluation, and really with the goal of making sure that our work is reaching the change in the world that we want to see. Thank you, Ian, for being with us today and for all the work we've been doing together. And then there is also Ludovico, who with me, and I'm Marta. We're both working for Slow Food, and we have been coordinating this work with Ian on integrating really this work on monitoring and evaluation and impact within Slow Food. And I'll stop here, and I'll give the floor to Ian for the rest of the presentation. And yes, I will share the screen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marta, and hello, everybody. It's fantastic to see so many people here today. The numbers of people who have signed up for today's event is really wonderful. We're really excited about that. Normally, we would want this to be as interactive as possible, however, we're not all in the same room. So we try to arrange some interactivity, firstly through Slido at the beginning of the session, and then through a survey that we'll share with you towards the end of the session. Really sort of love you to make your views known through those two mechanisms. And I hope that we'll be able to sort of play your ideas back to you through this. There's the chat, and it's great to see everybody saying hello from all around the world. I won't be able to kind of monitor that very closely, but Ludo and Marta will. So we'll hopefully pick everything up that comes through that route. As Marta says, I've been working with Slow Food now for probably about 6 or 7 years, and during that time we've sort of been working really hard to try and get the slow food movement to sort of think about its impact, the challenges that exist within the food system, so huge. It's very easy to lose track, and we'll come on to that point again. And the whole point about understanding impact, understanding how we measure our impact, is about trying to keep ourselves on track, trying to make sure that we continue to focus what we do on the change we want to see. So that's what today is all about. So I'm going to move now. Hopefully everything works. I'm going to move now to the opening slides. Here we go. Here we go. Right, it does work. So that's one thing that we've achieved. So why measure impact? That's the first thing that we want to cover, and that's where we'll first be asking a question for you to get involved with. Secondly, what are the intended impacts of the slow food movement? And I'm assuming, because everybody's here, this is a slow food meeting, I'm assuming that everybody is really interested in that. So we'll then move on to how do we do it? Whoops, I didn't want to do that. I don't know quite how that happened. How do we do it? And so we'll look at the practical steps that involves. There we go. And then after that, we will have some case studies. Firstly, we'll look at a fishery case study, and secondly, we'll look at some case studies around cheese, and then we'll move on to the conclusions. Hopefully it will all have made sense, but please feel free to ask questions, and I'm very happy to take any interventions that come along the way. And then we'll finish off with a survey, which will hopefully demonstrate exactly what we're talking about. So this is the slide you've seen twice already, unintentionally. So our first question to you is, why do you support slow food? And at this point, I'll hand over to Marta and Ludo, who will, I hope, introduce the Slido.
Yeah, so I'm just exiting the presentation, and Ludo is sharing in the chat the Slido, yes, link. So you should see in the chat the link where you can go on Slido and enter the number that is also in the chat, and then Ian, you can explain. But essentially, like you're invited to write one word. Why are you part of slow food? And we will see a word cloud generating, taking shape as you write. So you can go ahead.
So what we're hoping will emerge from this is your ideas about and the things that matter to you about your engagement with slow food, not just a number, which seems to be what we've got so far. So if you follow the instructions, change. There we go. Somebody's got it. Brilliant.
Yeah, I was going to say, if participants prefer writing in their own language, that is an option. We will ask helpful colleagues in case we have trouble with the translation.
Great, and already we see some words starting to emerge as more significant. The bigger everybody, I presume, knows how these things work. With the word cloud, the more times a word is mentioned, the bigger it becomes. I love this. Family is very much at the heart. So we're seeing some really interesting groupings of words, justice and solidarity. I think, could you help me? Militancia, is that activism?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. And it should be militantia, is that right? Depends what language it was said in the first. So community, that's really interesting. That's coming at the heart of what people want to see. Help to save the planet. Mes racine, what does that mean?
My roots.
My roots, okay, yeah, yeah. Our roots are our culture of food.
We have some contributes from the chat then. So biodiversity and to help to save the planet and sustainability.
It's interesting that justice is coming through strongly. I see it in different languages here. It may well be coming through as one of the strongest if it was all in the one language.
We also have food sovereignty and equality.
Yeah. I'm afraid my Cyrillic isn't great. So grana, is that? Ileeta?
We can ask the colleagues who speak Russian to type it in the chat so we know.
Odrzliwa. Hrana, okay, hrana, of course, is food. Okay, I think what's coming out of this is that people are making a connection between their communities, a sense of justice, and a need for change. And I think that's very much what slow food is all about. Marta, I hope we can keep this, and maybe if people want to go back, sort of put other words into it between now and the end, we can revisit it and see what it looks like at the end and capture it at the end. Yeah,
I have to actually stop the poll now just because other colleagues are going to use this tool, but we will have the word cloud and we can share that together with the presentation in a second. Yeah. So I will stop here and switch to the presentation.
Okay, fantastic.
Okay. Back.
Okay, so why do you support slow food? Well, what came through very clearly was the centrality of food in not just nourishing ourselves, but in our communities, and in the sense of justice that is around that, and the need for change. So the next thing that we wanted to then put before you is this summary of slow food's call to action. So what I hope you can see is the ideas that you've put forward there in the Slido, very much at the heart of what the call to action from Slow Food is all about. So our starting point in the real world is that the global food system is unfair and unsustainable, and there's a need to fix it. And we have 3 goals: to defend biodiversity, educate the wider world, and to influence the private and public sector. That's not just because that's what we'd like to do, it's because we see those 3 goals as being the keys to unlock the change we want to see and get to the point at the bottom of the slide where the global food system is fairer and more sustainable. And so this is why you see the words "so that." We're doing influence so that more businesses support, so that we have good, clean food, etc., etc. So if we're going to make progress towards those goals, we need to know that we're actually taking the steps that make a difference. And that big goal of changing the food system is huge. So we need to break it down into interim steps. And so that's why we have campaigns, and that's why we have projects. And they are the interim steps in our campaign, our overall campaign to change the food system. Our ultimate goals are our real world impacts to achieve the change that we want. So how do we do it? We need to understand the real world problem. It's very easy when you're working on a project or when you're working on a campaign to get very focused on the process that you're part of and forget that this is actually all part of a bigger picture, that there is a bigger set of goals that you want to achieve. And so when you are delivering, because we will only get to the goal that we want by achieving these little steps. So when you focus on that delivery, you need to understand the progress you're making with your own campaign, but also the contribution it's making to that overall goal. So this slide is intended to help you understand that your program, that's the middle part of the slide here. That's the thing that you can control. But you design that because you understand, firstly, the needs of the real world problem, and you understand the outcomes that you want to achieve in relation to the socioeconomic problems that you're trying to address. In our case, to change the food system. Now, my role with Slow Food is as an evaluator, and my role is to look at the programs that Slow Food undertake and make a judgment on the ideas at the bottom of this slide. And every project needs to have those sorts of judgments made. Is what you're doing relevant? Is it sustainable? Is it effective? Is it having that impact? Is it efficient in the way it's actually sort of working? So looking at that map, if you like, sort of again, we design our project, we design our policy based on the needs that we understand. So our understanding of the food system is that it's unfair. Our understanding of the food that very often is made available to people through shops and restaurants is it's not necessarily the best, the most nutritious food that could be made available. So our purpose is to understand what our real world problem is, design some objectives which address that real world problem. And so in our campaign, in our project, within this red line on the diagram, those are the things that we can control. And we undertake our project by designing our objectives, determining what we're going to put into that project, how we're going to deliver it, and what we expect to get out of it, and the results that is intended to achieve. But that's all very containable. Those are the things that we can do. We design it in order to have an effect on the real world, on the real world problem that we have identified. And that's where the term outcome comes in, because we need to see a real world effect of any project that we undertake. And I hope that'll become clearer as we look at the case studies that I've got later on. So, what are the practical steps that we need to take? So, understanding our real world problem. Oops. Slow food is focused on good, clean, and fair food. And the rationale is set out in the more detailed call to action that I'm sure a lot of you have seen. So there is a real world problem. Food production is unsustainable. The food system is producing poor quality, unhealthy food, which is causing obesity and consequently sickness. The current food system is a major driver of climate change. And the current food system is unfair, particularly to small producers. So what is slow food looking for? It's looking for a new paradigm around the food system. Firstly, good, quality, flavoursome and healthy food. Clean, production that doesn't harm the environment and does not drive climate change in the way our current food system does. Fair, a system that has accessible prices for consumers, and fair conditions and pay for producers. So the old food paradigm and the new food paradigm. The old food paradigm, unhealthy, unsustainable, unfair. The new paradigm of good, clean and fair. We have a process of change, and that process of change is based on campaigns, on projects, on education and advocacy. So, is it all about measurement? Oops. Okay, sorry, the controls aren't working very well for me on my screen, and I've just jumped over a couple of slides. So apologies to everybody for that. So how do we know we are making progress? This is a really huge set of changes, and no one activity is going to deliver it on its own. And change will only happen as a result of very many different actions. And as I said at the beginning, it's very easy to lose track when you're going through changes like this, and to feel that the activity that you're undertaking is a means is an end in itself, rather than being part of a bigger set of changes. So it's very important, therefore, that you choose indicators of change that enable you to see that you're making progress, both within the campaign that you're perhaps following through, but also its overall effect on the real world problem that you've chosen to address, i.e. the impact. So is that all about measurement? When you're looking at an individual project or an individual campaign, you look at inputs, you look at activities, you look at outputs and results. So in terms of that little diagram that I showed earlier on, it's the area within the red circle that you can control. And within that area, you ought to be able to count You ought to be able to measure what you're achieving. When you start thinking about the impacts that you're having, i.e., the real world effects of the work you're doing and the changes that you're making, it's not always quite so easy to measure. But it's really important that you do think this through and you do have an idea about how you will be able to explain to yourself, explain to maybe the people that fund you or the people that support you, the progress that you're making. Sometimes it's about a story. Sometimes it's about a really simple, identifiable act. And we'll talk a little bit about a campaign later on that had a single objective and it achieved that. So looking at performance indicators and impact indicators. So, excuse me, I'm just trying to get rid of the gallery. It keeps on going over the slide. As I said, if you're looking at those things that you can measure, you have outputs, activities, and results where you can have the things that you are managing directly, where you can have smart, visible, direct measurements. However, if what you're measuring is the number of people you trained, or the number of clicks on your website, that isn't actually changing the food system. So as I say, it's a less direct link to strategy. It's just a step on the way. Impact indicators are about outcomes. However, they're often indirect. They can be comprised of different elements. That's what we mean by a composite. But they are directly linked to your strategy or to your learning. So if I take this event today as an example, successful implementation of today's training action, i.e. the number of people who came, your satisfaction, the fact you've said that you've learned something, that's kind of directly measurable, and that tells us about performance. However, the thing that really matters is what you do next. And so what you'll see in the survey that we come to at the end of today is a question about, do you intend to do anything differently as a result of what you've learned? And we hope, if you say you will, that you will, and that as it says at the bottom of the impact indicators line there, that there will be an improved impact of slow food from better actions because everybody's got a better understanding. So can you see we're moving from performance indicators where people are talking about, we had a nice time at a training event, to the impact of that training, where it says directly, yes, we've changed and we are better and we're having more impact and we are moving our goals forward in terms of changing the food system because we understand these issues better. So what are the key indicators? Why do we use the word key? Well, when you are designing a project, maybe for an external funder, let's use that as an example, they will often ask you to collect information about a lot of different things. They aren't all key. They aren't all the most significant. And it is your job, if you are managing a process like this, to choose the key things, to choose the most significant things. And that's different from simple monitoring. Simple monitoring tells you if you like, it tells you every step of the way. Key performance monitoring focuses on the one or two things that really matter within that process, that tell you that the rest of the system is also working. So, and also key performance indicators should connect your monitoring to your targets. So looking at some examples, because I think examples often bring an idea alive. Key performance indicators. So these are things that you can control. These are things within your project. So qualifications achieved in a training program. So that's a key performance indicator. That tells you that you've run your training program effectively, because people have got to the end of it and they've achieved their qualification. That's not an impact, though. An impact is the fact that people have got those qualifications, and then they've gone on and they've made use of them in some way. They've changed whatever they're trying to change. A funding target achieved in a fundraising campaign. Everybody's always very pleased if we've gone out to collect a certain amount of money and we've achieved it. But if it's only sitting in the bank, that's just performance. It's the fact that you then take that money and perhaps design a project which supports farmers in their ability to market their food better, to support their families better. That's impact. Just collecting the money, that's performance. Signatures for a campaign petition. We all feel great when we've got lots and lots of signatures on the petition for a campaign. But it only makes a difference if you then take it and say and say to the politicians, 300,000 people really care about this and they vote for you. They pay your taxes. You need to listen. So it's what you do with it. That's what really matters. Listening of a product by a retailer, that's great. But if nobody buys it, it's not made. You've not actually achieved the change that you're looking for. And attendance at a show, huge effort goes into shows and events. The slow food shows and events in Italy and around the world. But just by getting people through the door, if all you do is entertain them and don't ask them questions and don't actually try and sort of get your messages across to them, then they go away having had a nice day, but nothing changes for them. These are huge opportunities, and see that you can make them work. So impact, taking all those examples, impact is the effect of such achievements. It's the so if you do X, then what happens? So if you've achieved your qualification, what do you do with it, etc., etc.
Ian, can I come in just with an example, just to strengthen what you've just said? I think here, like, this is a really important point, also in terms of the work we do and how we communicate about the work we do, because it's not just about, indeed, like you said, the last example, let's talk about this Terra Madre and this special edition and say we organize this many hundreds or thousands of events globally. What we've often heard also from funders or sponsors is like, okay, great, and then what happened? As in, you've organized all that, but then what was the real, like, what was the change in the real world? So indeed, did people change the way they buy food? Did people become more active in food policy issues? And so did more producers get inspired and started producing in a more good and clean and fair way? So again, it's really, the impact is really this, like, I've organized something and what happened as a result of it. The fact alone that I organized it and 300 people participated says I've organized a good event, but did it have an impact? Did it change the real world?
Yeah, absolutely. That's brilliant. Thanks a lot, Marta. And we can come back to this at the end again if people want to kind of explore this again. But it's not so simple, because And this is one of the things that in designing projects and measuring success, people find really difficult. Now, we'll talk about one example, which I'll just talk about a little bit now. There was a proposal to change legislation in Italy so that cheese could be made with milk powder, which would have undermined artisan cheesemakers who make cheese from real milk, and basically undermined the product for good. This was something that Slow Food decided to create a campaign around, and the example of 300,000 signatures on a petition, that's what they managed to collect. They promoted it at the cheese show in Bra, and it was a huge effort in terms of promotion. It had a lot of effect in the media, and in the end, it achieved its goal. The legislation was resisted. I hope it still is being resisted. And so in that case, they were able to measure success with that single goal. But in other cases, and an example I'll come on to in a minute or two, which is about some fishermen, it's not so easy because there isn't just that single measurable goal. And in those cases, it's often a narrative or a case study that actually explains best what you've managed to achieve. So we'll move on to the Wadden See Fishers. This is an example of a group of fishers from the North Sea coast of Holland, who or the Netherlands, whose story I will tell. So in the Wadden Sea, an area which has been a rich fishing area for centuries, in the 20th century, the fish stocks crashed, and is still in the position now that there are virtually no fish in the Wadden Sea. And so artisan fishers have no product to source. And they also feel they have no power in the local area. They feel that their perspective is overridden by more powerful stakeholders. And there's a very interesting story here to be told, which is not the one for today, but some of those stakeholders are conservation bodies who also feel historically they haven't had a voice. And so you're getting, if you like, interest groups being who are playing each other off. So there's a complex story here. But the conclusion that they felt from all of this was that artisan fishers have no future in the Wadden Sea. There's no, the nets are empty. So it's time to look for something new. And I made a mistake when I said fishermen earlier on, and fishers is the far more accurate description, because these are families who are engaged in this fishing, and this is a style of fishing, and in this case they've moved from fish to oysters, which is not so exclusively male in the way that it's conducted, because it doesn't require so much brute strength as and the dangers that that fishing does. And so the oyster harvest was became the replacement artisan fishing system, and of course when you move from one product to another, you have to find a new set of protocols to manage the way that you operate. You have to find a new set of sales routes, because the people you used to sell to may not necessarily take the new product. And so it was a time really to start again. And this is where slow food came in. Slow food through the Presidium system offered the Wadden See Fishers the ability to redefine their environmental and social protocols. And it also gave them a mark, a kind of one of the things that they talk about being really important for them is actually being able to use the slow food mark, the logo. It gave some weight to their product. So they created the Presidium for the artisan oyster product. They used the logo and the communication tools, and they used the Slow Food Network connections to shows in the Netherlands, Germany, and Italy. The results was invitations to those shows. The results were new sales outlets and increased value of the product. But the impact was actually quite some way beyond that. It wasn't just about sales. Yes, financially, these fishers wouldn't exist if they weren't able to sell their product. But the thing that struck me when talking to this group was they said, we would no longer exist if it wasn't for slow food. And we know we're not alone. And that's the power of being part of a network. And that's something that it's not possible to say, right, here is a box you can tick on this questionnaire to say, this was the impact. This is where stories come in and tell you the real effects of what you've done. So going back to what we were talking about earlier on, this map, hopefully it's starting to make more sense. The needs that the Wadden See Fishers identified was the fact that artisan fishing had collapsed. The objectives were, we want to re-establish artisan fishing. Inputs, the slow food mechanisms that I've talked about were provided, and they made use of them, their activities. The output was the new protocols, and the results was the new sales routes that they established. The outcomes was then there's a sustainable livelihood for these artisan fishers, and there's this sense that somebody believes in them and they believe in themselves. And that's the sort of the beauty of being able to tell this story, is that you can actually sum up that impact in a human story. So I've summarized that up, and in that table, as you can see, all the things I've said are there. So this material will be available to you afterwards, and we've done a more detailed version of that, which I won't go into in detail, but this tells you the sorts of things that happened in that case. So other examples, as I said before, there was a real world problem about a threat to artisan cheesemakers in Italy, and a really concerted campaign to resist that change in legislation. In that case, that proposed change was resisted. Whoops. Somehow this presentation seems to have a life of its own. I'm not quite sure how it changes itself, but I'm sure somebody will tell me afterwards. It may well be something I'm doing. It's the way I'm looking at it or something. Anyway, so again, we've got some more detailed information about that milk powder campaign and how all of the elements that were put into place within the flow of the project then led to those sort of concrete outcomes in the end. One of the things that Marta, Ludo, Michele, and the rest of the team have been doing with me over the last few years is looking at events and looking at the way in which we understand the impact of those events, and hopefully so we can improve those events by building on that understanding. And so we've been running surveys at Cheese, at the Terra Madre last time, at Slow Fish as well. And we're starting to build a dossier of information about why people come to these events. What is the motivation for attending these events? And looking at an individual event, that's interesting. And it tells you where the business opportunities sit in comparison with the food consumption and food policy issues. Now, sorry, the gallery is just sitting over the top of what I'm trying to read. There we go. So it's jumped forward again, Marta.
Apologies. You know what? Whenever I unmute myself, it jumps. So okay. Apologies. It's my hand that is making the slides move. But now it's back. I will stop muting myself.
So we then looked at the people who came to Cheese last year, and we compared their likelihood to take action between the attendee types. And this is a really interesting slide, because the people in the food system that have the most power are the people in what we've defined here as the supply chain. These are the retailers, these are the marketing people, these are the people coming to talk to producers on behalf of big distribution companies. Well, more than 70% of them were saying to our researchers, yes, I will change the things I'm going to do as a result of what I've learned at Cheese in 2019, which is an amazing result. And it's something that as we look forward to Cheese in 2021, hopefully, when we'll all be able to go out again, we can focus more on that group, because they are the ones with the real power in the system. And it's interesting that consumers see themselves as less likely to take action, possibly because consumers don't see themselves as being quite as powerful. But there are interesting results there that I think future events need to look into. So I'm going to move on. We did look at it on gender roles. I thought it was quite interesting that the women were more likely to say yes or no, men more likely to say maybe. I don't know what it tells us, but it's an interesting result, I think. So here we are in Terra Madre 2020 special edition. And what we'd like to do now is to understand your perspectives on the things that we've been talking about. And so we have a survey, and again, Marta is going, I hope, to take control, or Ludo, to share the survey that we'd like you to fill out now, because we'd like to focus on a question within that survey, which is about impact. And it's the question about, are you going to do anything differently? Are you going to use what you've learned from this event? So I think I hand over to you at this point. And what I will do, as you're filling in the surveys, I will talk about, I'll just go through the conclusions, so that it won't be silent.
Yeah, indeed. So Ludo should send via the chat the link to join to the survey. So you should receive it. It's a survey that is available in the language, in almost all of the languages of the training today. We don't have it yet in Russian, but we need to organize that in Russian. Also just to tell you, we have been running different surveys. We are running different surveys through Terra Madre precisely to measure the impact of the different activities we're doing. So if you yourself are organizing a Terra Madre event, after your event, you will receive an impact form to collect indeed the evidence. So I'll just go here to see, well, these should get populated as people answer, but you might need a few minutes to respond to these. It's not too long. And maybe I will just use the chance to also mention that you see that at the end of the survey, we ask whether we can keep in touch with you, and also following all the GDPR, so the privacy rules. But this is a way to allow us to, again, get back in touch with you at a later stage and follow up with you either on some answers, or in some cases, like the survey we run for the digital events of Terra Madre, is to get back to respondents in, say, 6 months from now and see whether they really changed their behavior, which starts addressing one of the questions that was asked within the chat. And we should have a bit of time at the end to start addressing some of those questions. And otherwise, if we don't manage to answer them all, we can send you the answers via email following this training session.
Okay, I'll, if I could go back to the slides,
yeah.
And I'll summarize quickly.
Yeah.
Because I know there are some questions, and it would be good to answer those. So that's the survey link. Hopefully everybody's got that now because it's in the chat as well. So conclusions. If you're going to understand your impact, you need to understand your problem first. You need to have a common view of your long-term aims, e.g., change the food system, and determine the steps that are feasible for you. And be very honest about the degree to which this can be addressed within your timescale. And when you do see some success, celebrate that success. Reset your interim objectives and move forward again, always aware of this bigger goal you're trying to achieve. So key indicators, select the things that matter. And then we can get through to things like in the milk powder example, resisting the legislation change was what we wanted to achieve. In the Wadden See Fishers, new markets, increased sales, what we wanted to achieve, both achieved. Not foreseen, however, that through that campaign for milk powder, Slow Food gained 300,000 new contacts. It's fantastically valuable for Slow Food as a whole. And in the Wadden See Fishers case, the confidence and belief in their future was something that we hadn't foreseen at the outset of that work. So, coming back to the call for action, hopefully it makes more sense now as you look at it and you see how these goals move us through to the overall objective, and understand what makes impact measurement work. So focus on the real world, use stories, but remember that what you're doing is you're giving a voice to the voiceless. If you construct your project appropriately, collect your information about your impact appropriately, people whose voices don't normally get heard have the potential to be heard. Provide credible evidence and use an approach that supports positive thinking and action. And I just keep coming back to stories. Stories are really powerful. embed understanding and make sure that people really care about evaluation. And when you get some good results, be proud of them and shout about them, championing to everybody that matters, your funders, your bosses, your stakeholders. So that is our last slide. That's where we wanted to finish the formal part of what we were saying, but we want now to hear what you've had to say through the survey.
So I'll go back to the survey and see, just need to reload the page and see what came. Yeah, so we have 43 answers so far, and considering also, this is an important thing to say when, Ian, you always told us that when there are surveys, it's to have a 10% rate of responses is a good result. I would say this is way more than 10% given the participants we have online.
Yeah.
And the question we wanted to focus on, but we don't have an answer yet. Let me see.
People haven't got through to that part of the.
Yeah, maybe I'll try to reload the page, but well, at least all participants said they found the training useful. That's already a good thing. The question we wanted to focus on was, are you likely to put in practice what you learned at today's training? And whilst I try to reload the page and see whether anything changes, one thing that we had discussed in the run-up to this training session was to essentially, yeah, people are still responding, which is fine. Essentially, what we could do as a follow-up to this training is, of course, share the slides, including the word cloud, and like all the information we've been sharing today, so that you can go through it. But what we could also think about is a toolbox that you can easily use to measure impact when you do organize, be it an event or another project, or whatever activity you're doing on the ground. So because this was also one of the questions, how do you measure behavior change? And the responses are indeed going up, Ian, as we speak. Where
Okay.
there
is
I would just add that we will also be able to share the videos in the different translations, so that would be also something we can add in this toolbox.
Okay, we've only got a minute and a quarter now. I noticed a question about negative impacts. Yes, absolutely, we report negative impacts because we learn lessons. And I think that that was something that was also said in the chat. How do civil society organisations set impact goals that are directly opposing local governments? Well, carefully. Frankly, the question came from India. I think you've got to see your project as a means of communicating, and the objective of your communication is to move everybody, move the people that matter in the direction you want them to move. So, actually, trying to set objectives that help to move that group forward. You've got to find ways in which you can communicate with them that advances their self-interest as well as the interests that we're trying to see. I think there might just be a problem with the survey because some comments are coming through saying they can't see those questions.
Okay.
5 and 6, which is a shame because they're the most important questions.
Well, we'll check what happened just there. But since we are at the end of the training session, what we will do as well is to reshare the link, like check if there was any technical issue with the survey and share it with you, but also share in writing with you the answers to the questions you asked and that we couldn't address right now in the training session. And but if we come to a close now, first of all, I want to thank you, Ian, for having offered this training and helped us work through what really it means to work in an impactful way. And from our side, what we really wanted to achieve was really to all start thinking a lot more in terms of impact. We're doing this because we want to change the world, which is something that we all believe and we do know. But I think the tools that Ian, you provided today can really help us structure that thinking in a more strategic way. And we know that some bits might have been a bit technical, but for any of you who are planning or are applying for funds to institutions or funders, this is something that can really help you in your presentations. And with this, I would like to, again, thank Ian and everyone who participated. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The future of our planet is decided at the table, in our daily food choices. What do we know about what we eat? How do we choose? Where do we buy it? You can make a difference and contribute to a future where everyone has access to food that is good. Eating must be a pleasure for everyone. We all have a right to food that is healthy, natural, fresh, and seasonal. Clean. Being aware helps us to choose food that is good for our health and the health of our planet. Fair. Knowing our food means making choices that are fair to us, to the producers, and to future generations. Slow Food has been working for over 30 years to defend biodiversity and fight the climate crisis by promoting good, clean, and fair food for all. Support Slow Food. Let's act together for the common good. Go to donate.slowfood.com/en and follow us at terramadreselunadelgusta.com.